First up, we're going to talk about the pandemic migration, which of course is affecting politics across the country because we have people moving in different states and we have people moving from cities to suburbs. As a result of all those things happening, as you might imagine, there is a lot that's going to happen with redistricting as well as with realignment in party politics. And so first up, why are people moving? Well, we know they were moving because of the pandemic, and we know that had a huge impact on people's decisions. But why? Why not just stay put where you were living? Because what was wrong with where you were living? Well, if you lived in New York City, it's kind of obvious that New York City has been run into the ground by no less than Bill de Blasio, the mayor of the city, but also the governor of New York, too. So we have people moving from state to state, from cities to counties. And the migration has really picked up, probably more so than in recent memory in American history. So here's what they say in the Wall Street Journal. The pandemic changed where Americans lived. Big cities lost residents as younger households left for the suburbs, and older people accelerated retirement moves while fewer newcomers came to take their places. That's a nice way of saying people left the cities, and there was a net migration from cities to counties, to suburbs, and to areas that are not urban. The pandemic has spurred a burst of mobility that is accelerating changes in where and how Americans live. Some people are leaving cities earlier, than is typical, while some older people are spreading and speeding up their retirement moves. Fewer newcomers are giving cities a try, meaning the people moving out aren't being replaced by fresh residents. So people are leaving cities. Suburbs are emerging as the winners from these changes, making the end of a decade-long growth trend for big cities. Companies intent on lowering overhead and retaining talent are opening offices there, and developers are adding amenities to keep entertainment dollars local. So there was this whole trend where people were moving to cities, especially millennials, and that was a decade-long trend. The pandemic happened, and then millennials and many other people realized, oh my gosh, these cities are not run very well, so I need to move. And move they did as a result of the pandemic. So nationwide, the South, especially Florida and Texas, added households while the Northeast lost them. Early results of the 2020 census, pegged to April and released this week, don't reflect most of the coronavirus pandemic's effects. The Census Bureau's American Community Survey will provide a detailed demographic profile covering all of 2020 when it is released this fall. But the fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that people were leaving. They were leaving the cities not just during 2020, but since 2020 into 2021. And we know that that's without question continuing to happen because people are seeing that politics in their states and in their cities are fundamentally broken. And when they see that they're fundamentally broken and they don't really want to put up with maybe years-long or decades-long correction to those politics, and they just don't want to put their lives on hold as a result of these poor policies, they move. And millennials, let me tell you something, millennials who were all about, and I know this personally because of the millennials in my family, they couldn't wait to move from the countryside to the city. They moved to the city, and now they're thinking about, that suburban life that you and mom had looks pretty darn good now. What did you know that we didn't know? We always thought we were right. Kind of interesting. And so, case in point, New York City is reeling from violence as police group officials ask, and police ask this question, when is the violence going to end? In Times Square, of all places, 3 bystanders were injured, including a 4-year-old girl and a tourist. A Times Square shooting occurred last Saturday. And so Alyssa Vogel, who's part of the NYPD, she is obviously a police officer in the NYPD. She was there when this shooting occurred, and she's a mom, and she saw this 4-year-old girl get shot, among others, and it was just indiscriminate shooting. They weren't necessarily the targets of the shooting because there was a dispute, apparently, in Times Square, of all places, between individuals, criminal elements, and a number of people were shot, including this 4-year-old girl's mother. They have all survived, thankfully. But Alyssa Vogel rushed to the scene, and we have ABC News interviewing her about this particular event. More proof of why people are leaving New York City and other cities. Here's that clip.
This morning, NYPD officer Alyssa Vogel is being hailed a hero, now speaking exclusively to ABC News.
I'm very grateful that people are taking it in that aspect of calling me a hero, but every officer on scene is a hero for that day too, because there were multiple victims and everyone did a phenomenal job.
Watch closely as she sprints down the streets of Times Square, a hub for tourists, carrying a 4-year-old little girl who was shot to a waiting ambulance.
As a mom, I think my motherly instincts just went to, I need to help her.
Yes, of course. I mean, she went and she rushed. She saved this young girl's life. And who knew? She obviously didn't know if there was going to be more gunfire occurring, or certainly police officers are now targets. So she ran into the fire. And you have to say to yourself, why would anyone want to cancel the police when they see this? And why would anyone want to stay in New York when they see this? And we know the answer now, because not just do we have information from the census, but when you actually look at the out-migration and the net out-migration from New York City, from San Francisco, from other major cities like Chicago, and you see where these individuals are moving, they're not moving from city to city, they're moving from city to county. They're moving from city to suburb. They're moving from blue state to red state. They're looking for places to go where they can be safe, where they can at least have some refuge from the pandemic, and where policies aren't crazy. We can only hope, podcast listeners, that they don't bring their politics with them from these blue cities. We've been saying that for quite some time. I have to tell you that of all of the fears that I have, that is my single biggest fear of this migration. And that is that the individuals moving from these cities are going to say, well, I want all of those conveniences of the city, and I want them where I am now. I want all of the entitlements from the city, and I want them in the county. It's like, no, go back to the city. Quite frankly, we don't necessarily want that kind of thing in the counties and in the suburbs. I'm hoping that they're moving to these areas because they are moving away and understand their mistakes. But only time will tell, actually.